Kev, how are you?
I'm good. Great to be here.
Great to have you. How are you feeling? You're the very first guest on the Jameson Graduate Programme Podcast.
Sure. I couldn't sleep last night, and I'm absolutely honoured to be here. It's like great opportunity for me. Cheers.
This is like the toy show for us, isn't it? Just like pure excitement.
Oh, it really is now. Yeah.
Kev, do you want to give a bit of background about yourself? I suppose before talking about your Jameson journey, maybe before you joined the graduate program back in 2017, you graduated from UCD. Am I right?
Yeah, I studied law and minored in philosophy in UCD for 4 years. So obviously started back in 2013, graduated in 2017, and kind of veered off the law path and started this career in international marketing and sales in the Jameson Graduate Programme. So probably not the most traditional route for someone studying law, but that's one of the great things at the program, that no matter what your background is, be it engineering or science, or maybe it is business as well, like, anyone could really apply and be successful in their application for this program,
And what sort of geared you, what made you apply for the Jameson Graduate Programme?
Yeah, I guess, I was delighted to study law, but I kind of, maybe after my third year, I kind of started realizing that this probably isn't, like, the traditional law route probably isn't necessarily for me. And then obviously the Jameson Graduate Programme have a fantastic social media presence. So I kind of just was seeing ads on my phone, be it Instagram or Facebook, and I just thought, geez, this looks like something I could really go for and something that I could potentially really enjoy. So I kind of would have spent the latter half of my third year like gearing up for it, and then went absolutely ham in my final year to make it happen. At that point, I didn't have my driving license, so I spent like a good 3 or 4 months learning how to drive again, wrecking my out lad's head, but all worth it in the end. I got my test and did my assessment centres, and it all worked out in the end, thankfully.
And then, so you joined the graduate program in 2017. What was your first role? Was the marketing assistant to the graduate program, which is my current role at the moment myself. And then you jetted off to Jakarta, am I right?
Yeah, exactly. So in my first year, I would have done, I guess, what you were doing now 4 years ago. Probably not as good, but try my best anyway.
Listen, hard beat.
Honest, but bar is very high these days. But no, I would have done that 4 years ago. I had an amazing experience working in the Jameson head office in Ballsbridge, and working on the graduate program team. At that point, as I said, I studied law before, so I never really had that access to international marketing. And I suppose for me, it was a great opportunity to really get that base level of knowledge of how marketing works, especially on a global level, the nuances and the differences between many different markets. And it just gave me a really good footing for when I did go out to market then as an international brand ambassador in my second year to Indonesia. I felt, very capable and very confident going out there. And then, of course, going to Indonesia was just a completely different experience. I was the first ever brand ambassador out there. So there was a lot of firsts. I was the first international person in that office too. So I was new for them.
Probably the first man from Kildare there as well.
I'd say so. Yeah. I have a big poster inside saying that first ever. I'm actually still waiting for the Guinness Book World Record to get back on.
Just you with like a flag as it arrived at Jakarta. It's just like with the Kildare flag.
Numbers were nowhere beside it as well. Like that. It's up there at the same level of achievements.
And what was it like when your first year over there? Because before you, of course, moved to Sweden, where you're based out of now, but what was, the kind of culture shock? How did you feel when you arrived in Jakarta? What was the experience like for you?
Yeah, there's no point kind of sugarcoating it. It probably, it was definitely more of a culture shock than I anticipated it to be, but in a good way, because I kind of wanted to challenge myself and I wanted to get outside my comfort zone. And I was given this amazing opportunity to work in Southeast Asia. Like I'd never been to Asia before. No one in my family had ever been to Asia before. So just moving there, you hear stories, but it's very much from a point of people traveling around. But to go into like a working culture in Southeast Asia was definitely a first for me. But it's things you kind of just take on your stride. Like we have great support from the graduate program team in Dublin. We have our market leads who focus specifically on regions who probably have more experience than us in that sense. So relying on them and of course our fellow brand ambassadors, we really look after each other and help each other through the tough periods as well. So huge culture shock, but to be honest with you, Podge, it was exactly what I wanted. So there was no major complaints,
Was it tough to settle down? Like, was it tough to settle in when you arrived? Because as you mentioned, it's a completely different like country, a completely different part of the world. And when you arrived, was it tough to settle down? Did you find it easy?
Yeah, it was like I think I probably put myself under a lot of pressure to like make it work straight away, and it's just not like that. I mean, I could have moved to Tullamore tomorrow, and it's not like you've become a local straight away. Like it takes a bit of time.
Tullamore is completely different. Stay away from
Tullamore's,
that.
I mean, lots of similarities.
Stay away from that place. You can move to Clara, but stay away from Tullamore.
I get that writing off you. But no, it was one of those things that there's an Irish community there, and when I got out there first, I reached out to them. I started playing a little bit of football there as well, a little bit of soccer. The local team there in Indonesia were just absolutely fantastic. I mean, as I said, I was the first international person going there, so they had no real experience of how I would get on. But between getting me a phone number, getting me a bank account, they really went above and beyond to make me feel very welcome. And then by the end of the year, when I was leaving, I was pretty upset, like, because you really get used to this way of living, and for all the difficulties you have moving to Southeast Asia, it's really exciting. Like, there's always stuff happening there. It's hectic, it's busy. They're huge cities, so there was a lot of really positive memories to my time there.
And then you mentioned there when you were leaving, so you did leave, and then you moved over to Stockholm, Sweden, where you are currently based as the brand ambassador. What was that like? Certainly in terms of moving to two completely different countries, what was it like?
Yeah, hugely different between the two countries. There's, to be honest with you, there's very little commonalities. Obviously, the weather is the first thing. Like, you go to the Nordics and you're wearing 3 layers in the winter, whereas I don't think I ever wore a jumper in Indonesia during my whole time there. So even stuff like that, and like the food, I remember the first time I met my manager in Indonesia, like I can't eat spicy food. Like, I never could. Like, that was just never a thing. I mentioned before that I was the first international person there. So he brought me out anyway for this dinner, like really nice restaurant, like really like authentic Indonesian restaurant. And there was this like stir fry thing he brought out. And I was like, I've had stir fry before. I probably made it in college a few times, standard enough. And there was little like green, like what I thought was vegetables, but they were just like extremely hot chilies. Just me and him catching up, like I'm like, yeah, this is my big plan for the year, and he's telling me about his background. It's all going well, and the next thing then, like, face starts like going bright red, tears streaming down, like my nose starts running, and he was like, I don't know if this fella's crying or he's going to like combust in a second.
He must be really excited to be in Indonesia. Like,
yeah, really excited, or he's homesick maybe. He's like bawling his eyes there in front of me, but I was like, man, I can't eat spicy food. So, stuff like that was very much an Indonesian experience. So it was probably easier to adapt to the food and the culture and stuff in Sweden, but kind of coming from Indonesia where you get so used to that, to go to Sweden, like it's a different kettle of fish completely,
And you've been in Sweden so for 2 years now. You're in your second year in Sweden, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, so I would have came there in August 2019, so I had a week at home first in between. Literally went, picked up my jacket, and then went to Sweden essentially, which was great. But just going back to the differences between the roles, I guess. When I went to Indonesia, I was given the opportunity to be the first ever brand ambassador there, which is really, really amazing for me. You're the one kind of forming the role. You're trying to make sense of the situation and for Jameson in this local market, and seeing what kind of consumers we can work with, etc. So really great experience. But when I went to Sweden, then I think I was like the 10th brand ambassador for Jameson there. So the role was very much formed. There was very much an expectation of what the Jameson Brand Ambassador does. So it was easier in one sense, but kind of more difficult in a different way, because first of all, there's not as much wriggle room, I guess, for you to kind of do what you want to do with the role. But then, of course, it's easier because the local market know kind of what to do with you, if that makes sense. But I mean, you always want these challenges, Podge, no matter where you're going. And
you mentioned there about the role, and I suppose that is, our topic of discussion today between myself and yourself, is the role of a brand ambassador. So do you want to like briefly, well, not briefly, in detail, give us, what is the role of a Jameson in detail? That's the purpose of the podcast. That's why we've all this time, Kev.
Well, you're not getting another word in there for 20 minutes, so you may as well put yourself on mute.
I'll take a deep breath. Yeah, and let me just get a bit of food. I'll sit down and you can just go in.
Just keep this recording. I'll fire on.
I'll leave for a couple of minutes, come back.
Sound.
So what is the role of a Jameson brand ambassador?
It's very, very multifaceted, and depending on where you're based, you'll have different focuses. I guess that there's 6 key pillars that we like to talk about when we talk about the Jameson Brand Ambassador role. The first thing will be brand education, and this is very much your bread and butter as a brand ambassador. And I guess it's kind of what people expect of a whiskey ambassador. You're trying to spread knowledge, awareness, key selling points about your brands to consumers or whiskey societies or bartenders, whoever you're chatting about. So that's kind of the bread and butter. And I think most brand ambassadors definitely have experience of doing that. When I was in Indonesia, I would have done like lots of whiskey tastings and whiskey educations because I was the first ever person there. So you're really just trying to get the brand out there, if that makes sense. And in that sense, I would have done what's called comparative tastings. So I would have done like Irish whiskey versus Scotch versus bourbon. And you're really trying to just explain, the key selling points behind Jameson and its production process and its really rich heritage as well. But then versus when I went to Sweden, then I probably do less tastings now. But the tastings I do would be kind of more portfolio tastings. So people are aware of Jameson and they're aware of Irish whiskey. So I might talk about Jameson Original, and then I'll talk about Jameson Black Barrel, and I might even talk about Redbreast, which is actually part of our whiskey portfolio too. And not many people know that. So you kind of talk of the nuances between each whiskey.
Did you know much?
And it would be a big thing with bartenders, especially in my new role now.
Did you know much about whiskey before your role as a brand ambassador, before joining the program?
It's a little bit embarrassing, but like I always liked it, but I genuinely, like bang average kind of level of knowledge. Thankfully, it's increased a good bit since, but
it would certainly want to.
It would want to, yeah. Thankfully, it has. Jesus, like I probably couldn't get that. Be recorded saying that anyway, but no, it has definitely gotten better. And like not just whiskey, like through the job, you learn about tequila and agave and gin and vodka and like a whole array of spirits too, which is great,
Yeah, like we're taught training and development, like how to do these tastings. So I think for people who are listening, that's one of the kind of misconceptions is you need to have a great vast knowledge of whiskey, but you don't. You're taught everything you need to know. But yeah, what else are the other pillars?
So then brand activation would be the second pillar. This is for me the most kind of exciting part of the role. It's essentially kind of bringing the brand to life. Like bringing Jameson to life and trying to make it resonate directly with our target consumer. And for that, like, I mean, I love the event side of things. I love organizing events. I love the kind of conceptualizing events from the start and kind of seeing the truth of the whole process and then really bringing it to life and kind of really bringing your ideas to life in that sense. And that's one of the great things at the role too, is that it gives you the opportunity to really do that. For me, thinking back to my favorite activations I've done, when I was in Indonesia, in Jakarta, I did the first ever Jameson, like St. Patrick's Day event there, which was unreal. It was like, we actually did it over 4 days, and we did it in our flagship bar, kind of our flagship Jameson on-brand account in Jakarta called Duck Down.
I was just going to say, is this the famous Duck Down bar?
It's the famous Duck Down, yeah. I think they might have a statue of me there now. That's definitely in my dreams. I don't think that actually happened yet. Not yet, anyway. But like we had like karaoke. There was like live bands. There was DJs. We had like Jameson New July went off for all weekend. So it was a really cool way of kind of bringing something that's so uniquely Irish, which is St. Patrick's Day, and kind of integrating it into the local Indonesian culture. And I mean, everyone had a great time as well. So that's probably one of my favorite things of brand activation. And I guess in that sense, it's important to point out that like the purpose of brand activation is not only to drive volume and drive sales, it's also to really kind of strengthen the brand advocacy and the emotional connection with consumers too. So there's kind of it's a double faceted thing in that sense,
Any cool events that you would have done in Sweden? Because recently, like, and last year as well, because Movember is huge in Sweden, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
it is.
You've worked.
Well, getting bigger anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Unlike my mustache that I can't seem to grow.
It's hardly still there, is it?
No. Although you wouldn't notice, to be fair, you won't even notice. But yeah, talk to us about your activation, certainly, because that's the most recent one that I can think of that you would have done in Sweden was Movember, wasn't it?
So this year for Movember, unfortunately, they couldn't do any major live activations just due to the ongoing COVID situation. So we had to turn a lot of our activations to digital, which was a great opportunity for us to kind of do that for the first time. And obviously everybody's doing it now too. So it's important to have that digital aspect. But this was actually our second Movember campaign. So the first one we did last year in 2019, we would have done like events in bars. I would have done a lot of tastings. And then we work with some barbershops too. As Jameson as a brand, we've worked with barbershops for years. So it's a really cool place for us to be. And then we obviously work out like a donation mechanic for Movember too. So let's say someone gets, you get free beard trims all day. And you might just donate to Movember in that, and then we'll serve you a Jameson ginger lime while you're having a beer trim, that kind of thing. So it's also a good point there that events like brand activations, they don't always have to be these big massive festivals that cost so much money. Kind of using a bit of common sense and making connections, you can do quite low cost events that are also really cool too,
And that's kind of the purpose. That's one of the things that, it's not just these, it's about building advocacy in the brand in your market. And you can do that through so many different ways. It doesn't have to be these massive, large-scale events. Which
exactly,
we look at Thomas and Casey who are over in Thailand, and they have run a massive event before, but it's not always the case too. And that's one of the great things about it, as you mentioned, is every country is very different in the nuances of what you're doing.
Definitely. But even like touching on Thomas and Casey there as well, I mean, I follow them on Instagram, obviously, and they always seem to be doing some really, really cool stuff. And I'd say, for every large event they do, they probably do like 10 small events in the build up to that as well. And by doing that, you really integrate yourself with whatever like tribe or community or influencer group you're trying to get into,
So Gav, actually, speaking of events as well, because you're big into your music and you're big into, like, you play music and you sing, and you've incorporated that into your events as a brand ambassador, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've done it a few times in the past now. It's not every event I do because they probably kick me out at that point. But no, it's one of the great things about the role that there are opportunities for you to mix your passions in with the job too. And obviously, music and Jameson kind of go hand in hand in a lot of ways. But I would say it's one of the defining points of the whole serious character thing that we're looking for with brand ambassadors is kind of getting outside your comfort zone and doing that in a nice kind of like fun way that engages whatever guest is attending, like be that bartenders or be that just consumers. And music is definitely a vehicle I've used to bring activations to life in the past.
And you've mentioned, I remember looking at your application process, like you mentioned that in your video, like showcasing your personality, and then as people know now, because it's just part of the role, like your personality has to come through and shine through.
Definitely,
You were talking there.
I mean,
don't go on.
I was just going to talk about the application video there for a second. I guess the big thing, I mean, even when I was doing your role, Podge, was the misconception that the video application has to be this like blockbuster Hollywood movie. And like, of course you can do that and it's great and it makes for great viewing, but I really wouldn't let that stop you. Like if you have a good smartphone, and most smartphones these days are unbelievable and they're more than capable of making application videos, just use that. But as you said there, getting your personality across, be that showing your passions, like, maybe you're into rugby, maybe you're into acting, maybe you're into sculpting, or maybe you're into playing music or whatever it is, but getting your personality across in an authentic way is the main thing to look for there,
As we say, showcase that serious character that you have. You were talking as well about your Movember activation, and a lot of it was kind of digital this year, and that, do you want to like talk about the pillar of digital that a brand ambassador has?
So about digital then would be another huge aspect of the Jameson Brand Ambassador role, and something I've seen definitely increase in importance over the last number of years. And obviously with COVID, I think kind of everything's gone digital these days, such as this podcast, which is a great idea. But with regards to my Movember campaign, obviously we had a lot of actual like live physical events planned, which due to COVID we had to either cancel or postpone, unfortunately. But we quite quickly turned all our activations online and made sure that people knew we were still quite active, particularly with the on-trade. And when I say on-trade, I mean like bars and restaurants and hotels or whatever. So one example of something we did was we sent out like lots of like really nice like Movember specific Jameson POS. So like light signs, like, those like LED light signs, like outdoor signs they could hang on the door, like menus and whatever it was. And then we had a competition with all the on-trade accounts in Sweden. I think there was like 58 in the end or something like that. And the ones that we felt kind of were the most creative in their social media posting, we get them out prizes afterwards. So it was just a cool thing. It was quite low cost, but quite effective as well. And hopefully a lot of consumers then were very aware of all our kind of large scale Movember activations then,
And then even in terms of digital, like for people who are listening, like you notice on the Jameson global pages on our social media, like a lot of that content comes through from the brand ambassadors, and that's something that you'd be doing as well, like looking for those unique Jameson moments that aren't necessarily these incredibly amazingly taken photos, even though sometimes they can be, because we do have some incredible content creators on the program. But often it's just
I'm definitely not one of them now. But
but we it's, and a lot of the photos that it's just these unique moments that you wouldn't get if they were set up in a studio. And that's one of the roles of brand ambassador, isn't it? To just be on the lookout for anything that just might be fun, that might be
100%. And I think, as you said there, it's not staged. It's very authentic photos from like real events or even just at home, like you have your butter Jameson and you have your ginger lime ingredients, and even just making that and having that on your balcony. It's very authentic content, and some amazing stuff I've seen over the years have been sent in by brand ambassadors. I think another really cool thing about that is that there's just such a wide network of brand ambassadors that, one day we'll see photos coming in from Norway in the lovely like snowy mountain tops, and the next thing then it'll be some beach in South Africa. And it's the same family of brand ambassadors sending this content in, but it's really authentic and it's just really diverse and really different too,
So we mentioned there, so we have the brand activation, brand education, digital. What else do we have on the pillars?
Share of mind is one that's kind of, I think, not really people wouldn't really anticipate it as being so important for the BA role, but it's actually massive. Just to give a bit of context around this one, like when you're a Jameson Brand Ambassador, you're sent out to market. Jameson is actually owned by a company called Pernod Ricard, which is one of the biggest wine and spirits distributors, sellers in the world. So you have massive brands such as like Absolute Vodka, Havana Club Rum, Beefeater Gin, all these amazing, really cool brands in their own different spirits categories. And then Jameson's right up there too. But as a brand ambassador, you're sent out to these markets, and it's up to you to kind of keep Jameson top of mind with the local office, be that your marketing team, be that the hiring management, or be that the sales team, and just keeping Jameson top of mind and keeping it relevant, and just getting them excited about the activations and campaigns you're doing,
Yeah, which once you're passionate about them should be easy to do.
Yeah, it should be. But it usually is, and obviously Jameson's such a great brand too that the people are always so excited to have a Jameson brand ambassador in the office too, because we do lots of stuff. We'll get involved with the Christmas parties, and we'll get involved with organizing different initiatives throughout the year, like internally too. And I've done a good few things with that over the last 4 years as well, which has been great.
And what's really cool as well is because we're part of such a massive portfolio and such a global brand, such a global company in Pernod Ricard, like you're exposed to other brands, and sometimes you can work alongside them, and you get to see so many different parts of the industry, which is really, really, really great, especially for kickstarting your career in marketing.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. I mean, as you said there, like the likes of Absolute Vodka, it's an industry leader over in Sweden. So being so close to the brand team there has been an amazing experience for me. And you get chatting to people at lunch, or maybe you might meet them for a drink after work, or like go for like an exercise class together. And there's so many learnings to actually learn within the office itself. And you can share that amongst brand ambassadors, or else maybe it's higher management. And we're always very willing to kind of like give you a hand and give you a leg up. In terms of starting your marketing career,
So we've left now. There's two more pillars that we have to talk about. Do you want to talk to us about influencer marketing?
Yeah, 100%. Like influencer marketing, it's a really cool aspect of the role, I would say, and something that really differs depending on what market you're based in. I know I've been saying that a few times in this podcast now, but that this is like, depending on what market you're going to be based in, you're going to be working with either barbers, you could be working with like artists, musicians, bartenders, guys who like design shoes, like baristas, whatever it is. And it's really cool in that sense, because you get to meet influencers, of course, but people who are like so passionate about what they do, and people that, had you not been a Jameson brand ambassador, you probably would never come across them, which is, really, really fun in that sense as well. For me, in Sweden, we work really closely with the bartender community, and you meet some amazing characters and some amazing people like within that. A big thing I would have done, talking about Movember again, this year I actually produced a Movember charity calendar with 12 cocktail bars all over Sweden, and it's one of those things that I think in 2020, like there's been so many things thrown up in the air and so many curveballs that people are really behind, like charity initiatives as well. So it was very close to my heart to kind of get involved in this in terms of Movember, but also a really fun, positive thing to do. Like we had so much crack making the calendar, and the feedback in terms of the bar community in Sweden has been really, really positive since. So just a lot of amazing memories working with the influencer marketing on the graduate program.
And you're not necessarily working with influencers in terms, although sometimes you might be in terms of like, you know, Instagram, massive following. As you mentioned there, it's people who are influential for the brand out in the market.
Yes.
And that varies
Exactly,
from market to market.
Yeah, I mean, they are just everyday people. Like they're super approachable, and as I said, depending on where you're going to be based, like I know the guys in Thailand work like very closely with the barbershop community too, and some of these guys might be like industry kings, but they're not like 7 million Instagram followers famous. But that's not them being an influencer, because within that local community, like they have a lot of sway, and they're usually really, really great to work with too, for brands like Jameson, you know.
So again, we've one last pillar to talk about before we come to the end of the podcast, which is insights. So do you want to give us what insights is to you as a brand ambassador?
Definitely. I mean, I think insights, it's something that we've always had an opportunity to do as brand ambassadors, and I've seen kind of like digitalizing it become more and more important over the years. But if you can imagine, Podge, there's over 60 brand ambassadors based all around the world working with Jameson. So it's a massive network to feed back in to the brand owner, to the Jameson brand itself. And be that consumer trends, be that competitor activity, be that, you know, the latest drink trend coming through or whatever it is. We're usually the ones closest on the ground to seeing that happening. And ways that we feed that back might be like monthly reports that we do. I know when I was doing your role a couple of years ago, I was actually working on like a brand ambassador insights report that we collated like based off feedback from brand ambassadors all over the world, and then shared with the international marketing team, and just to see if they found out interesting to work on too, or from that report. So it's something that I've seen become more and more important over the years, and just a massive resource for the Jameson brand.
So as you say, like, you know, you know your market best. You're the eyes and ears for the brand out in the market that you're based out of.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, as brand ambassadors, like a lot of us are quite field based, and obviously it depends which market you're in. I know when I was in Indonesia, I was probably 70% field based, 30% in the office. I think now in Sweden, I'm kind of half and half, 50% each, between the office and the field. But in saying that, like we are out on the field quite a bit, be that visiting non-trade accounts, be that visiting agencies, meeting with influencers, whatever it is. So, you know, we're quite close to the ground, and we're quite close to just the pulse of what's happening in terms of trends, like upcoming trends coming too. So yeah, it's a huge resource to feed back into the master brand of Jameson.
Okay, that is the 6 key pillars of a brand ambassador role, and you've really gone into detail there. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Before we wrap it up, I want to ask you, do you have a highlight of your time in the program so far? And meeting me can't be it, so like a second highlight.
I mean, otherwise it would just be 6 of the same highlights over and over again throughout this series. Highlights. So cliche, so many. But I would say, right, a huge highlight for me was when I was in Indonesia. Obviously I was based in Jakarta.
Yeah.
But Bali was kind of on my doorstep. Like Bali was like me going down to Cork for a weekend. So I went down there.
Me go to Leash. That's what Bali is to me.
Huge. Port Leash, lovely this time of year. But Bali, it was on my doorstep, like, so it would be like an hour flight. And I got to go down there loads during the year. But a big thing we did was in May, like Ramadan is quite a big thing in Indonesia. It's predominantly a Muslim country. So the whole country locks down for Ramadan, like they obviously observe their religious practices. But in Bali, it's actually Hindu mainly. So it's still quite open during Ramadan. So I got to go there and work for 3 weeks, like doing like loads of brand educations, a few activations in terms of cocktail bar takeovers too, which was a first for me as well. But just to get that experience to live essentially in one of the tourist like capitals or main tourist attractions in the world really, and surf and rent a moped and you know, it was just class. It was really, really cool. And I was like thinking, like, I can't believe this is, like, I'm doing this for my job. It was somewhat, I didn't expect it going out to Indonesia, and it was definitely a huge highlight of my year there.
Well, I'll tell you, that is a really cool highlight, to be fair to you. Kev, thank you very much for being the first ever guest on the Jameson Graduate Programme Podcast. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you.